Okay, colleagues, questions for the leader or members of the cabinet? Well, who's going to be first? Yeah.
Hi, Kerry Barley from the Enterprise Architecture team. A question about what are your plans for supporting the workforce with the delivery of your capital ambitions? For example, you mentioned digital, and there's certainly potential capability and capacity gaps within the organisation. So to deliver that sort of ambition, you need to actually bring in a new skill set that we don't necessarily have here.
Yeah, I think that's well recognised, and that's precisely, there's a management restructure being proposed at the moment. That's precisely why we're creating a new officer at that level to specifically look at digital and technology, but also recognising that exactly the point you make, Gary. There might be skill sets within the council that no longer, that we don't have, that we need to have. Where we need them, we need to create them, employ people, recruit people. I was reading the other day how 50 years ago, half of the architects in this country started their careers with local authorities. Now that is no longer the case, but we can't have the continued hollowing out of skills and expertise within the authority. That goes for your area, but that goes for many areas. So where we need in-house expertise, we need to go out and get it. And the perspective I come from is that the public sector to be able to deliver it first and then draw in additional specialism where required from the private sector.
Andy Greener, Highways. We've heard talk about sort of working in silos, offices and even service areas. Things like Cardiff Manager Forum, the Ambassador situation as well, have all been sort of introduced to assist with that. Will they carry on in the future?
We have no plans to change that whatsoever. But perhaps at this juncture, to respond to that specific area, I can introduce Councillor Carol Wild, who's got responsibility for transport, and talk about some of the ways he sees, that silo working in his area being addressed. Do you want to come up here, Karen? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh, I think. Thanks, Andy. And I've already spoke to a number of the team in those departments, and I think there's an acceptance amongst the team and ourselves that there has been what people call silo working in the past, and it's not something we immediately do. But my view on communication, having spoke to the guys, it's not just about making sure that people always tell you things, it's also about being curious about what other people are doing, and that's something that we're really trying to encourage in that department. People go out, show curiosity, over people's shoulders, asking questions, and people feeling comfortable talking to each other about what's going on. And I know there's improvements there to do things, because there are so many departments doing different things, but the only way it can work is with those things coming together. So there's a bit to go on it, but it's something that we've all got our eye on, and we just ask you to keep on doing that, showing curiosity and keep on sharing thoughts and ideas and spending time together.
Point around the Cardiff Manager Forum, all those mechanisms, absolutely. I think the value of those fora is acknowledged, so there's a strong commitment to ensuring their continuation. Alice?
You quite rightly mentioned the growth momentum in the economy and the benefit to Cardiff and Wales as a whole, Hugh. How should this be leveraged to benefit those communities in our most disadvantaged areas?
I come back to the point in the speech, Ken, about the link between good jobs and good education. We start with the latter, and I think we have to help kids make the link between what they spend their first 16 years of their lives doing and what they spend the rest of their lives doing. Initiatives like the Cardiff Commitment, I think could be game changing for the city, and I think there's regional potential there as well to roll that out across South East Wales, because people say we don't have a strong private sector in Wales, but I've worked in the private sector. There's some incredible innovation going on in Cardiff and in the wider region. So it's working in partnership, using the council's heft to link up those opportunities to those deprived communities, and making sure that people growing up in those communities are equipped with the skills that the private sector needs. Because and we're not talking high-end skills either. I was talking to developers a couple of weeks ago that were saying, we struggle to fill construction jobs. Well, those jobs should be being pushed out into places like Ely, into places like Tremorva, Trowbridge, so that people are aware of the opportunities and gives people something to work towards through their school. But it's down to initiatives, I think, like the Cardiff Commitment to make those links.
Matt Parry, Cardiff Council's Youth Service. My question centres on local democracy. And does the leader support the vote for local government elections to be lowered to 16 and 17-year-olds? And the second part is, how do you think we can involve young people more in democratic processes and civic life?
Yes is the answer to the first question, unequivocally. For the second part of the question, I'm going to ask Councillor Sarah Mary, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Education, to answer it, because I think it sounded harder. Sarah.
I'm not sure you shouldn't have asked Chris Weaver, actually, but never mind. I mean, obviously, we value the work that the Youth Council does in terms of civic engagement. But we've also tried to run a number of events over the last couple of months. We did one for Local Democracy Week, where we had school pupils who were in the council chamber. They got the delight of hearing Hugh and cross-examine him exactly like you're doing today. But we're also planning a similar event next week, where we will have 2 of the local MPs in the chamber again, being asked questions by pupils, and actually hopefully reinforcing that sense that not only have they a role to play in voting, but actually being a citizen is much more than just going to the polling station and voting every few years, whether it's, being involved in local community work or writing to your MP, your local councillor, actually being active in your community and not purely exercising a right to vote.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the question, Matt.
Hello, Councillor Thomas. I'm Rachel. I work in customer services, C2C libraries. I just wanted to ask, we've seen a lot of changes lately, both on the political landscape and the way that we're delivering our services. And you mentioned earlier it's a positive because we've seen a decrease in complaints year on year for the last 5 years, and also an influx of really good compliments and case studies coming forward. So to keep that going, to keep that momentum, how do you see the Cabinet supporting the customer services function and making sure that the customer's at the heart of all of our services?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. You can tell you work in customer service because you're the first person to introduce your whole job description. So, I think there's a lot the Cabinet can do in terms of, particularly in terms of messaging. I had a fantastic tour of C2C a couple of weeks ago, and it's a really professional organisation, and it's quite a different feel actually to lots of other parts of the council in terms of the way it works. But I think we have a messaging duty out to the public in terms of the use of C2C as a one-stop shop for the council. We also need to get the messaging right about the move towards digitalisation as well, and partly because we recognise there are savings if we get that right and we get that behaviour change out there into the public. That's kind of my initial views. Councillor Chris Weaver, Cabinet Member for Finance and Modernisation, might have some further thoughts as well.
Thanks, Hugh, and thanks for the question. And firstly, congratulations on, again, the drop in complaints, but also the increase in compliments. I think certainly as councillors, we know it's a lot harder to get a compliment than it is to get a complaint, and I think that's true of everyone here. It's a very key question, and digitalisation does come into it. And when we're looking at how we shape our services, we need to be looking at them from end to end. And the customer does have to be, the citizen has to be at the heart of that. And how we respond to that is crucial. People increasingly experience services in different ways from other organisations in the city, and they're going to expect that from us, from you. And we have to make sure that that attitude, that ethos, runs throughout it. So I think there is a piece of work to look at how the customer service attitude that so many of you have can be embedded in every service we do. And as we do look at the whole point, from the point that somebody gets in touch with the council to how we deal with their need, their inquiry, to how we deliver it to them at the end, that thread has to run through it. So it's a really good point, a really good question, and one we're very conscious of. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Next question.
Hi, Jan Coles from Children's Services. You mentioned all of us giving consideration to how we can provide opportunities to young people. I wondered if you have a vision for how those ideas for opportunities can be drawn together and brought to fruition.
Sorry, say that again, Jan.
You mentioned all of us giving consideration. I think you did anyway. I hope you did. Otherwise I've made a terrible mistake. I thought you mentioned all of us giving consideration to how we can provide opportunities to young people. I wondered what your vision is for how those ideas can be drawn together so they can be brought to fruition.
You know what I was saying about that? You know, we'd no longer have all the answers. But there is no simple answer to that question, is there? Because if we'd known that 10 years ago, then everybody leaving school would go straight into work. I do come back slightly to the answer that I gave to Ken in terms of linking up opportunities at the school with the workplace. I think the council itself, if you ask about my vision, well, I would love for us to do even more in terms of getting apprentices into the council, also getting new graduates out of university into the council, so that we start to grow our talent base, you know, from the bottom up, but also to do that as an exemplar to other organisations. I think we being the city are hamstrung by austerity. I joined a large multinational on a graduate scheme. As soon as austerity started, one of the first things they cut was their graduate scheme. So we have to win the argument with the private sector, and we have links with the private sectors. We have £3 million worth of spend that's externalised with the private sector, but we need to start persuading them, actually you need to be investing in the youth of the city as well, and we have an expectation as a frankly major contribution to the city's economy that you do that as part of your work for us. So certainly you ask about my vision. Well, it's certainly making sure that every sector pulls its own weight in creating those opportunities, and making sure that we as a council provide young people with that skill base, with that education to go and seize those opportunities.
Sorry, me again, on another sort of digital...
He's an example to you all,
reading quickly through the capital ambition, it mentions about smart cities, but that actually, the way it's written, whether intentionally or not, read quite siloed to me, because with smart cities, the true strength of that is actually developing partnerships with the various suppliers in the city, so your utility suppliers, your network infrastructure, health boards and all that, and looking at how we can help each other with various data sets and actually make more informed decisions. Has there been any talks about setting up a partnership board just in relation to like this digital agenda or a smart cities agenda? Because, like I say, it comes across very siloed and just the council trying to be smart by itself, which isn't very smart. So tell me more about how you think that would work. Fair enough. There's various bits of literature out there. I know the British Standards Institute has worked on a variety of guidelines called the PASS, Publicly Accessible Systems or something like that. So they talk about having a shared vocabulary, shared data sets, how you categorise things, and they've got various models there. I mean, putting in place is a totally different situation, but until you start working with those partnership boards and potentials and talk about how you can actually, we've got this bit of information, you've got that bit of information, with some common keys we can link it up and actually can find stuff about the city that we didn't know and make more informed decisions. Like I say, it's easier said than done, but it's, the private sector and potentially areas of the private sector we normally wouldn't talk to as well, like your utility companies, your network providers for your internet, there's all the smart sensors, internet of things. It's a very wide picture, but I think if you're going to be smart, then you actually need some sort of partnership board just focusing on that and having the right people in there, which might not be the people that normally attend these other partnership boards. But sorry, I don't have the total.
No, I think what you're setting out there, we would be absolutely on the same page as, and I think it comes back to the issue of the question of partnership, recognising that we don't have all the answers ourselves, and recognising the opportunities for innovation that working in the way you're describing there offer. I mean, one of my real frustrations of the last 5 years as a councillor is how, when it comes to IT, you know, a lot of the council's systems internally to Cardiff don't talk to each other, and certainly in terms of between Cardiff and the Villa of Glamorgan, between Cardiff and the Health Board, they don't talk to each other, and that's adding time into the business processes, which means that, you know, our staff are able to spend less of the quality time dealing with issues and more just on, you know, on working through process. So what you're suggesting there as an idea of that partnership to get innovation going, absolutely on board to looking how we can put it into place. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Juliet Gamlin, Inwood Investment in Economic Development. Just like to find out a little bit more with the ambition for Cardiff. We've got a fantastic city. Its regeneration growth is just astronomical compared to what we've had over years in the other core cities. What are we going to do to shout about our story through the rest of the UK to sell the city, especially with Brexit coming now, that will increase the growth, the capacity, the talent, the skilled jobs we're trying to attract? Will there be investment in doing that to say, great, look, Cardiff's the best place for you to bring your business?
Yeah, I'm going to bring Councillor Russell Goodway in a second, but give you a warning, Russell. But we absolutely have to do that. It's interesting that you phrase it, what we're going to do to compete with other UK cities. And I'm always struck, actually, that in relation to London, Cardiff is really well positioned in terms of the cost of doing business here should be far less than the cost of doing business in London. And when you talk about financial industry, digital industries, we should be an attractive proposition to companies currently based in London to bring them here. We have 3 fantastic universities. I had a man who was lectures in computer science come to my surgery last night, and we started off talking about a housing issue, ended up talking about the computer sector in Cardiff. They do amazing stuff. There is that skill base there. So I think we need to maximise our comparative advantages to London in particular, but other cities, and go out there and talk to businesses. And what I'm saying to businesses already based in Cardiff is that they have a role to play here as well, because nothing attracts businesses to the city, in my view, so well as other businesses saying Cardiff is a great place to work and do business in. But Russell, can I bring you in now and just your reflections on that?
Well, I don't think there's anything new, really. I mean, there is not a single major project in this city that's been delivered since 1994 that hasn't been delivered in partnership with the private sector. The public sector may, you know, what we've got to do is give political leadership and deliver the narrative, develop the narrative that other people will repeat. And down the line, you'll hear it come back to you, and then you know you've got your message around. But, you know, we've had to develop and become very smart at when we haven't got money of our own to develop, you know, to deliver the projects we want to deliver in the city. We've got to become smart at spending other people's money on our agenda. And we've done that very successfully in Cardiff, I have to say, over the years. We've got to make better use of Welsh Government money in terms of their marketing budgets. And we work very closely with them, and I'm pleased with the relationship that we have. I mean, we used to be able to do it with Cardiff Bay Development Corporation. They used to have a massive marketing budget, and of course that was lost to the city. But the private sector too are important. And, you know, in the Heather Joyce administration, we developed the Cardiff Business Council. With them, they used their money to build the model that we used to take to London and used to take to Cannes, to Mippin, to highlight the ambition that we were having in terms of developments. And it's amazing, isn't it, how many conversations our officials can have in those settings with people who want to be part of that agenda and want to help us deliver what we want to see in Cardiff. You know, there are loads of people out there, given political direction and political commitment, will want to be part of what we want to see delivered in this city. And what they need from us, in terms of our planners, they need to make sure we get good decisions, early decisions, that they're not going to sort of have aborted expenditure. They need it to be easy to do business in Cardiff. And cities have reputations. When we compete with other cities, it's on the reputation of how easy it is to do business here compared to Bristol, or compared to anywhere else. And business will go where it's easiest to do business. Because why do you want to push water uphill when you can go with the flow?
Or indeed, why do you want to wade through treacle? And that brings it back to why we need to be much more streamlined as an organisation. Last point on that, I think, as well, is I think it's important that all that council officers understand the offer of the city as well. And I know we've got in City Hall this amazing model of the city that identifies all the developments, either with planning consent or in the pipeline. But I only saw it for the first time a couple of months ago. I bet that most of you in this room don't even know it exists. But it just sets out how the city could change. And I'd urge you in the break after this that you have a chat with economic development colleagues and get yourself down to City Hall, because it's a fantastic model, and it just sets out how the city can develop over the next quarter of a century. Next.
Hi. Ooh, I work in IT, but in my spare time I volunteer for a homeless charity who work with 16 to 24-year-olds. I don't think anybody's blind. Homelessness is rising. I want to know what Cardiff Council is going to do to protect the people from becoming homeless that are on borders like right now and could potentially find themselves homeless.
Yeah, it is on the rise. Councillor Linda Thorne and myself went out with some of our teams on the streets a few months ago, and saw firsthand the amazing work they do. I mean, the outreach team, they literally knew the names of most of the people they spoke to. It was incredible, and I think the figure of something like between April and August, we've helped set over 70 people into housing. So we do some amazing work, which often gets lost in the debate about the growth of homelessness, but there's absolutely a commitment to do more still. Can I bring Linda in at this point? Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Hugh. I brought notes. My memory's not as good as Hugh's, but I have to say it wasn't bad.
But your facts will be more correct.
I have, but they weren't bad, and it was between April 2017 and August 2017. We assisted 74 people off the streets, and that was 49 with substance misuse, 12 with mental health problems, and 8 with alcohol problems. But at the same time, I have to say, while we were taking people off the streets, there were more people coming back on, or coming on the street, than we were taking off. So it feels like we're fighting a losing battle. But we've been successful. We put some bids together for some innovative funding from the Welsh Government, and successful in receiving that money. And it will be used for a number of schemes, and I do have to look because I might forget them all. But they'll be used for new advice and support services. So we'll expand the hours, extend the operation hours to provide additional drop-in facilities for those who are street homeless, providing female-only accommodation for women at risk of sexual exploitation, a housing first scheme so that we can, rather than getting people off the streets and into a hostel, to try and get them permanently housed, so that you don't get people who are getting entrenched in street homelessness. A complex needs project, which is referrals for rough sleepers into 4 self-contained units with intensive specialist substance misuse support. Day centre services working to provide and target early intervention and opportunity for those accessing those services, and extending the emergency spaces. As well as that, we've set up a multi-agency task group with the police, health service, and the council, working with all of our partners to actually try to get as many people off the streets and into accommodation as possible. There are some people who don't want to come off the street, and that's the message we've been trying to get out there for people actually not to give money, because they won't come into the hostels, because while they're out there on the streets, they can get as much as £100 a day, and if there are events going on, maybe £200 a day. And so where people feel that they're being helpful, and very often, I've felt it myself, you give to somebody, it eases your conscience, makes you feel good, but actually we're helping to keep them on the streets, and we need to get people not to do that. But working collectively, what we want to do is, the police could just move them on, but they don't have, there is no point in doing that. Collectively, what we want to do is to get them to engage with us, to get them into accommodation. But also there are other schemes looking at moving people on, because we do have over 246 hostel spaces, which are full. The problem then is getting people out that end to make room for other people coming on. So there is an awful lot taking place. I understand that you probably won't see any difference in the impact. And I actually spent Saturday, I had a day on my own, so I thought I'll go into town. I never go into town, sitting in Queen Street on one of the benches, just to see what was going on and to experience how people were feeling. And it was various, and you could see people looking at people sitting there in sleeping bags with pity, some with distaste, some with just didn't know what was going on. But I think the point from everybody who passed them by was it's not acceptable in any way or form, either for the individuals or for those people who want to experience time in the city, because there is some aggressive begging going on, and that's not good for us, it's not good for the city. There's a huge amount going on. We have lots of people too who are coming forward who want to volunteer, and I know shortly we're launching a volunteer portal, and I hope that that will help us to bring more people on to help us to work with homeless people, because very often what they need as well is, if we can get them into accommodation, is support and mentoring, because some people end up going through this homeless process 3 or 4 times because we get them rehoused, but they don't get the right support then once they've moved on. Hope I'm not going on too long, because I'll talk for that forever.
Thank you, Linda. That's the question.
Point out that from experience, I'm sure you have if you did sit on the street, that the people are turned into addicts because they are on the streets, which is where they do need the support to stop them becoming addicts when they first become homeless. Because if you're on the street in the freezing cold, if there's a bottle of whiskey given to you, you're going to drink it to keep warm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's my thing, is the addiction from becoming homeless. Then most people are not addicted before they become homeless. It's through being on the streets they become addicts.
You're right. Some become homeless because of alcohol and drug addiction. Many don't. Many because of multiple other social reasons, family breakdown, out of work, anything. And it is their life on the street that drives them to addiction, whether it's alcohol or drug abuse. And that's the point about setting up the multi-agency task group, because what we need to do is to be working with those people. But it's doing it at both ends. So it's dealing with the problem we've got, but also some of this money is being used for new people coming onto the street to make sure that we deal with that as well, so that they don't get entrenched. But you're absolutely right, and that's the point I mean about talking about support, because I'm trying to think of one story where somebody had actually been housed 16 times, but kept losing their tenancy. And very often, and what you'll see, and what I've seen being out there on the streets, is that when they get housed, they form relationships on the street, and you can see people in groups. Those are their friends. Those are the only people that they feel care about them. So they may move into a room, or they might move into a flat, but they're there alone. And what they do very often then is go back to their network of friends, which are on the streets. And very often then, they're either drinking or they're taking drugs. And that's why we need to try and break that link, really. But it's not easy, it's difficult, but we're intent on doing something about it and working with all partners. And I have to say, we've had lots of people coming forward from business even from all over the world, I have to say, who want to help us with this problem. And I do believe that all working collectively, we can start to make inroads. But it's not just Cardiff. The problem is much worse elsewhere, but that doesn't mean to say that I don't believe we can address it, because I think we can.
Thanks, Linda. I think we also need to be honest with ourselves in this room and message this to the public as well. The council is doing what it can, but a lot of the problems, in my view, and I can say this because I'm a politician, are being created by UK government policy, in particular benefit sanctions, universal credit, and that is driving demand, which is putting pressure on our services, and we have to be honest with the public that is happening as well. I'm going to move us on if I can.
Hello, my name's Lisa Wood and I'm working in adult services. Just be really interested in the Cabinet's response and comments about how we are going to integrate closer with health. I cover the hospitals, which is an absolute prime area for our relationship with health. Just interested to hear how you think we can develop that whilst retaining our status as a local authority.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm going to bring Councillor Susan Elstmore in, the Cabinet Member, in a second, but I know Susan is particularly evangelical on this issue, sits on the Health Board as an independent member, and she and I met with Maria Battle last week, I think it was. There are so many opportunities there, but I think we have to have honest conversations with the Health Board in terms of an expectation that they properly come to the table as well. I'm struck by the example of delayed transfers of care, where the council over the last 3-4 years have put in really significant sums of money into detox and have achieved good results in terms of bringing those rates down, and they are freeing up beds in hospital. Then it's saving the NHS money, and it's providing a better level of care to patients. But actually, it's the council who's put the investment in, and we're not seeing any savings directly out of that. So there has to be a level of maturity in the conversation from both parties, I think, in saying this is something that we can only solve together by pooling budgets. There's clearly the legislation on the matter as well, which is not perfect legislation, if I can describe it as that, but there is a commitment there from our side, certainly, and I know that's shared with the Vale Council as well, to try and make it work. But Susan, can I bring you in at that point?
Thanks, Hugh. Thank you, Lisa. Where are you? Hello. It's really, really interesting, and actually for me, this is one of the most important areas, I think, if we're talking about our principle of supporting vulnerable people. We've really, really got to get into the space with our health colleagues, and actually in relation to the questions in relation to homelessness that Linda was mentioning, we've got to get into the space with all of our public sector partners. But to go back to health, part of this is really building the kind of trusting partnerships, and you're doing that, Lisa, I know, in terms of the work with the hospital. Hugh's talked about kind of open and honest conversations, and sometimes those conversations can be quite difficult and tricky, but we have to stay with it, we have to bear with it, and we have to have those difficult conversations so that we can go away feeling as partners when we separate and go back to our own organisations, that fair compromises and fair decisions in terms of if it's about funding flows, that's key. But actually, at the end of the day, what we want to be doing here, in particularly in this space in relation to social services and health, we want to be for the user, for the individual citizen. They don't care whether the money comes from health or whether the money comes from social services from the local authority. They want the finest and best services that the public servicing, including health and local authorities in Wales, can provide. And that's certainly the space that I'm in with health colleagues. We've got much, much better relationships with them, and I can only see that building on those relationships, building on the trust, that we will improve services for citizens, really, against a backdrop a very stark austerity. And I know Hugh's thanked you, but I want to thank people in this room because you are doing incredible work under difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. You talk about the relationship with health. I also mentioned in the speech how I see the need for a link up between social services and schools as well, particularly in terms of the early intervention prevention agenda. And I wonder if at this point I can bring Councillor Graham Hinchy, kind of member for Children's Services, in to talk about what we want to talk about, what we want to achieve in terms of early intervention and the development of signs of safety.
Well, thank you, Hugh. It looked a bit different from up here. A lot of people out there. So, in terms of Children's Services, first of all, I'm really proud to have taken on the cabinet role. 3 years in the budget has been quite difficult, as you can probably appreciate. But I'm really excited, and I'm looking forward to working with lots of people in Children's Services. And I've been out and about quite a lot for those who are in that service. So what are the pressures and demands in Children's Services? Well, we've just come back, the director and a couple of us from the Bournemouth conference of social service, and we're not different. So the first thing is we're not different from any other city across the UK. England are facing something like £2 billion worth of shortfall gap over the next few years in children's services. So the rising demand of children in places where they need to become looked after or need some assistance is growing. Now, Jan Coles asked a question earlier on and has organised a PIN conference very recently and is really proud to come along and talk with that. We've heard from people in Newcastle, Jan, about the similar problems there. So if we look back at 2011, there were 520 children, looked after children, being presented in Cardiff. That number has risen now to 790. So what our biggest challenge is to reduce that spiral and turn it round. So Hugh was talking about the signs of safety, which is a strengths-based approach where social workers have more time to look at the cases, early intervention. So we've got to stop those children wherever possible by early intervention, by working through schools, by working with health, as Susan Elsmore has said, and identifying those children and stopping them coming into care. Undoubtedly some will, and that is high cost. But what we have to do sometimes at the end of that process is take them into care for their own safety. So neglect is on the rise, child sexual exploitation is on the rise across the UK, and so we need to be very much upfront with dealing with that when we have to. But we are certainly looking at early help. We've certainly got the signs of safety working, and Swansea's example of that happening 3 years ago has not only stemmed that rise and graph, but also turned it round and reduced it. So reducing the number of people that become looked after children is absolutely the core of what we're doing. So signs of safety, early help strategy, child sexual exploitation, and of course opening of the MASH, our central hub in the police station where health, where social services, where the police, everybody is working together in that room, and I've been really pleased to go along there and see people having that conversation really quickly and identifying children that are at risk tonight and being dealt with very, very quickly rather than some of the processes taken in the past perhaps too long. So there is a a challenge across the city for children who are coming into the system, and there's a budgetary consequence of that. But I'm really proud that social workers across the city are working really hard, and we as a cabinet actually put a lot more money in to create posts last year, and we've recruited. So it's about stemming that spiral, and we've got some really good processes in place that I'm sure will work over the next. But it's not going to be an easy fix. It's going to be about a 2 or 3 year process to make those things happen.
Thanks, Graham. Any more questions?
From the events team, you spoke passionately about how you felt Cardiff's position within Wales was vital, and one of the key areas for that is within the cultural industries. I just wondered what the council was doing to ensure that the Welsh Government, the Arts Council, other organisations shared and supported that vision?
Yeah, great question. I mean, Cardiff's a city like no other, I think, in terms of its cultural and sporting offer. I think my second week as a councillor, I was involved, having been elected in 2012, was involved in doing interviews for Sky News 24 about the Olympics coming here. So it's been a deliberate strategy that we've pursued over the last 20 odd years, I think, to really sell the city as particularly a sporting, yes, culture, but perhaps not as prevalent as sport, but as a destination. I think we've got some incredible cultural assets. I talked in the speech about an aspiration to build another one, the indoor arena, but it's putting the building blocks, the jigsaw pieces in place, I think, of what a truly world-class city has in terms of its cultural offer, working with partners in the creative sector in particular, and if you think back to how that relationship has changed over the last 5 years, when we moved away from a kind of a system where council was providing grants to arts organisation, it was quite a fractious relationship because those grants were kept being cut, to now much more of a collaborative relationship. I think we're really on a good trajectory on that course. I'm going to bring in Councillor Peter Bradbury, if I may, who's the cabinet member, just to talk a bit more about culture and major events as well.
First of all, I want to praise you and your team and the events team. Were an exemplar, I think, of a public sector team delivering major global events. In particular, you look at the Champions League final this year, that wouldn't have happened without a fantastic events team. I'll say within these 4 worlds, the FAW can do it on their own, could they? And being a Welsh football fan, there's not a lot the FAW can do on their own. But I mean, I'll make the point about...
Nobody tweet that.
No. But if you do, you can attribute it to me. I'll be fine with it. But no.
We stand behind what we say.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Today I'm going to major events. Well, I've always played a big part in this city. We've since securing the FA Cup final in 2001 and moving towards having what is the largest global sporting event this year. On your question on the culture and what are we doing, I'm always constantly going across the road making the point that if you want a vibrant capital city in this country, you need a vibrant cultural sector. We are looking on our part to do that. Ruth Cayford, I don't know if Ruth is here, is doing a fantastic job in terms of looking at the live music strategy and also looking at making what are the remnants really of the, say, Romerby Street campaign, making sure that something good comes out of that and something long-lasting. And if you look at the Cardiff Contemporary Initiative, that is a first-class example of, on very little money, how you can deliver a world-class arts offer. In terms of sport, we put money into 3G facilities right across the city using trying to creatively use Section 106. And we've managed, when other cities and counties and councils have been closing their cultural facilities down, we're looking at ways that we can grow our cultural, the footfall into our cultural facilities. The challenge is capital. It's similar to what Russell said earlier on. It's getting private investment into what are essentially always been seen as public facilities. I'm consistently trying to look at creative ways to do that along with officers. I think my area is wholly discretionary, and I hope people in statutory areas don't mind me sort of singling out the staff and the discretionary services, because they have taken a huge hit over the last 7 to 8 years. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for the work that you do and right across this council in discretionary services, because they are, although they're not statutory and although we don't have to deliver them, they are the things that people in this city associate Cardiff with. Thank you very much.
Hi, Pat McGrath from Waste Management City Operations.
This is the rubbish question, right?
My life is rubbish. First of all,
we can do a double act if you want, Pat.
To me, to you. First of all, thanks for coming down to Lammy Way and spending some early hours with the waste collections and street cleansing teams early hours of the morning. So appreciated that through the crews and the management team. We have obviously split from our street cleansing colleagues in the past, and thankfully been recognised that putting us back together is the right thing. So thanks for doing that, and we are shortly going back to city operations from economic development. How do you see things are going to go forward to make sure that partnership is successful going forward?
The partnership between those two different departments?
Yeah, in actually managing street cleaning, cleaning Cardiff.
You know, it's interesting because I think if you asked an ordinary Cardiffian, I don't think they would be aware that there are two different departments. They don't see two different departments. All they see is a bag that's not been collected or some rubbish. I spoke in the speech about putting ourselves in the shoes of the citizen, and that's what I think in particular that we as politicians need to do, and to put the challenge to you as officers. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me why that person can't pick that bag up, but that person can, and in the meantime, you know, God knows what's happened to that bag. So when I talk about seamless services, that's I think what we need to try and get towards. I'm going to bring Councillor Michael in a second to talk more specifically in terms of the practicalities of the answer. But you know, reputations of cities we talked about a lot today about how we want to sell Cardiff. Well, nothing affects that image so much as the street scene. I mean, I think our cleaners and our waste teams do you know, amazing work in some of the toughest working conditions of the council. You know, by and large, I think the city you know, is a good city, a clean city, and particularly the city centre. When you look at the turnaround, you know, overnight post major events, they do terrific jobs. But I think we can also be honest that there are some processes at the moment that aren't working. That's what's behind some of the changes we're starting to make. But yeah, I'm being very clear in my expectation of you, because I'm very clear what the expectation of the people on Cardiff is on us. That, you know, they want to live in a clean city. So Michael, can I bring you in? Just because you're the last to speak, Michael, doesn't mean you can speak for the longest. Okay.
The chief executive told me I've got at least an hour and a half, so I think what Pat was saying about you know, bringing them together is a necessity, and what Hugh is saying is right. Out there, they don't know the split, they don't know the silos, they don't know who works with what. What they expect are the basics. They want the rubbish picked up, they want the recycling done, they want clean streets. Now, every month I get all the stats from C2C. You know, Isabel keeps sending me this lovely stack of stats, and I spend hours looking at them. And there's some fascinating ones. You know, as a city, we collect 24 million bags, caddies, you know, whatever colour. That's a hell of a number. But we got 18,000 are not collected. Now, if you work it out on the old abacus, because I can't do calculators and stuff like that, it works out at 0.75%. So we got a success rate at 99.25. Now, if anyone knows of another council, another private business that can better that, I'll go and visit them. I'm happy to learn. But the important part is not that. It's the 18,000, it's the 0.75%, because that's an email, that's a complaint, you know, and there's a reason why they're left behind. You know, are we using the right trucks? Are we using the right fuel in the trucks? You know, I'm fed up of being told that the fuel of the future is coming. I don't know when the future is. You know, does someone come with a board that says the future is next week? You know, you can start using this fuel. So I ask questions to, you know, to the officers. Are we using the right fuel? Are we using the right trucks? Are the rounds correct? You know, are we delivering the service that they want out there and they expect out there? Because I think it's important that we get it right. You know, Hugh mentioned the 70% recycling rate. That's a challenge. Again, are we recycling in the right way? Is the quality of recycling? Because believe it or not, even rubbish is a quality. So if we don't get the rubbish right, we can't make any money from it. We lose money. He pesters the life out of me, and Chris refuses to give me more money. So there's all those type of issues to get right. So it's not just one simple, yeah, we're picking up your rubbish, and we're not. You know, we really have got to work hard, because we've got a city that's expanding, we've got expectations out there arising, and we got to deliver it. And the people who make it happen is not so much me or my senior officers, it's all of you. Because the best asset this, you know, we have as a council is you. It's the staff, and it's the dedication. And I think once you get that message across, so we're all united, we're all working together for the city, I think it goes a long way. All I can promise to do is my best, and I will. And I won't make any dramatic announcements. Pete, you can calm down, you're all right. Not even for a cat.
Thank you, Michael. Guys, I do think we are running out of time, so I'm going to draw the questions to a close. A couple of things just to say as I do that, really to thank you again. Firstly, as has been said several times, but worth reiterating, for all the hard work you do for the council, and please can you take that message back to your teams as well. And thank you for making the time today to come to this session. I want this to be the start of the conversation, really, and the intention is to have more of these dialogues, not necessarily in this space, although I think it's a pretty wonderful space, actually. I've never seen the three rooms knocked together. We want to continue having conversations with myself, with cabinet members as well. So watch this space, and if you can cascade that back to your teams as well. If people are wondering, oh, why was I not invited here? We want to have that conversation with as many people as we possibly can. My thanks to my cabinet for coming today and for answering questions as well. And to you guys, you know who they all are now. So all of us, when you spot us in County Hall or even in the street, do come up and introduce yourself, because sometimes we might not know you, especially if we're a cabinet member for another department. Please come up and say hello, and any ideas you've got, any of that cross-silo ideas you might have, feel free to share them, because I want it to be a to and fro to me to you relationship. So please come say hello to us. Can I also thank the guys who've made today a success? I think it organisation of 300 people doesn't come easy. I think the new branding in particular looks great, put together on a shoestring budget. I don't know whether this is deliberate, but this guy here was a year above me in school. So top marks for whoever did that. And he also lives in my ward, so I think that's probably a vote lost. But I do think the branding looks good, and hopefully it gives a platform to sell what I think is a really positive message of real opportunity for us as a city over the next 5 years, and to set a course for the organisation and for the council for the next quarter of a century. There's food outside now provided by Youth Foods. I've had lots of their cakes over the last couple of months. They are delicious, and perhaps there might even be a supply of them coming to the canteen in the very near future as well, if we can make that happen. So take the time to have a cup of tea, and maybe we can continue the conversations there. We will certainly be continuing this conversation in the weeks and the months to come. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.